Genesis 11. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. They said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, "If, as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth.
Thank you, Willie. I thought that reading about the Tower of Babel was such a, the Old Testament's brilliant because it has these stories. Cleansing, murder, rape, injustice, poverty. They're all creations of the rational mind. The word tyranny, I use the word tyranny of the rational mind. Tyranny is a cruel and oppressive government or regime. That's what it means, tyranny, a cruel or oppressive government or regime. And it's derived from the word tyrant, and a tyrant is an absolute ruler, especially one without legal right. Cruel, oppressive ruler. And, the way that the mind works is almost like that. For most of us, our minds are absolute rulers. And even if we think ourselves as spiritual and very elevated and mindful as well, I bet there are still times when, your mind unleashes its tyranny around you, on your family or your friends or your partner. We know that the mind does have that tyrannical streak. Now, once again, I want to remind you that we're talking about the rational mind here. The word mind itself comes from the German word Gemind, which actually means memory. So the whole area of the mind, it suggests memory, remembrance, the state of being remembered. And that's what's sort of bound up in the whole concept of the mind, being able to go back to something else and relate to it. Memory is part of it. And also the other word it comes from is the German word min, and that actually means love. And the original idea of memory, of loving memory, there is the concept of loving memory. It comes from a root which means to think as well. And it denotes the state of mind. But there is this concept with mind, I'm not just talking about the rational mind, of loving memory. And we can see really from that there is more than just the rational mind. We've got the body mind. Those bits, the memories that are stored within us that teach us, how we breathe our breaths and how we beat our hearts. There's a memory within our bodies that just knows naturally what to do. I think there's a social mind. Remember, it's memories again we're talking about. A social mind, a combination of all the rational minds around us. And we think of the social mind as it develops, as it recognizes social rights, that as it recognizes how to behave with each other. And our social lives grow together. Slavery is not a good thing anymore. We gradually go towards an understanding of civil rights, of all the different rights that come up. And our minds develop and remember, and there's that social mind. We talk in law of the concept of the controlling mind, where corporate law acknowledges that corporates have a moral responsibility. They have to remember, what they're doing and what the effect it's having. Then there's the concept of a planetary mind, the memories and traces of how the Earth developed and how it remembers to carry on being sustainable. It remembers, plants remember, the trees remember to keep on putting out their leaves and all that. There's a mind at work there. And I think that mind goes further. The whole of consciousness, in the broadest sense, is in fact a mind. In the way that it evolves is based upon memory. The whole of evolution is a mind. It's based upon remembering what worked. Anything that has a referential base can be seen as a mind. And it refers back to something else in order to continue its operation. We're going to look at some of these aspects of the mind over the next few weeks. And Jane Godlieb from Shakti Shala is going to be here in 2 weeks' time to talk to us about the whole idea of the body-mind. So we're going to just sort of look at how the mind is working here. But the tyranny we're talking about here is the one that relates to the rational mind. The body-mind and the planetary mind, I think, tend towards the idea, the German Min idea of a loving memory. There's an idea that love is an order given freely. And I think there is a sense of a loving order in the working of the universe. But that's something you have to work up yourself, I think. But I get a sense that there is a loving order in the universe, in the planet we live on, with plants and animals and our body, in that it keeps us actually going. But then you have the rational mind, which, let's face it, is the most advanced expression of consciousness that we're aware of. The rational mind is the most advanced expression of consciousness that we're aware of. It's capable of recognizing what's going on around it, and through memory, able to reflect, self-reflect on its situation and adapt accordingly. It enabled us to come out of the plant and animal jungle and provide organized and planned food to keep us going. It enabled us to create communities, to build towns and cities, and to advance medicine and science to an incredible level. But it's also hampered by its purpose. And the purpose of the mind is to survive. It is geared completely towards survival. Your survival and its survival as well. Its survival is front and center of its activities. And the way it enables that survival depends on the experiences that it's had, how it reflects on that. To begin with, it's just a question of getting by, to avoid the perils of wild beasts and the weather, centuries ago, thousands of years ago. And then as communities began to form, it became about the survival in relation to other members of the community. The mind wanted to survive within a community itself. And in doing that, it attempted to work out codes of behavior that would enable it to follow rules that make life simpler. And the Ten Commandments are an example of that. It's one of those codes of behavior that the mind worked out in order to see if we could actually live together more easily. However, the freedom it has to think and self-respect meant that it always had its own self-interest and therefore didn't want to be subject to any form of control unless it was by other minds who tended to control it through fear. So that self-interest is there, and it didn't, the self-interest enabled it to be controlled by other minds through fear. And so societies have grown up where the need to control has meant that some rational minds get together for their own self-interest, and try to control others. And you get the whole mess that you see around the world now. All different minds, all wanting control, all wanting survival, all wanting their bit of it, all trying to work out how to get it. And, that affects us all. The idea of original sin was used to explain why the mind goes off in these sorts of behavior. There's, whole theology of the fact that Adam and Eve and original sin, and therefore that's why it's all there. But, in reality, it sort of happens to each of us in our lives as we go along. We experience, when we're born, I've told this story before, I know, but those of you who haven't heard it. When you're born, you do experience yourself as perfect. I mean, in those little beginning years, everything you do is perfect. You wander around just actually saying a word. Oh, you're so sweet. Lovely. You're so wonderful. Your parents come and tell you, you go to the loo. Oh, well done. What a wonderful thing you've done there. Oh, isn't it wonderful? Have you seen what he's done? And, you just couldn't be more perfect as you wander around the place. And then, you just feel that sense. You see it in children's faces. They beam and they're just told how marvelous they are. And then, they get to the point where they're so marvelous, they do a picture